Hi everyone, I'm Aesah, and welcome to my guide on Arcanist Syndra in set 11. At the time I'm recording this, it's still in PB, so things are subject to change, but things that will not change are the traits of the units, so we'll just talk about assuming the set is reasonably balanced, these traits should work well together. So I made a written guide for this, but I also want to make a video guide that will go into a lot more detail than the written guide. So because Syndra is a 30 mana champion, blue buff is going to be really good. Shojin and Adaptive are completely fine replacements, but having a mana item will increase Syndra's damage output by quite a lot. I put these items here, but it doesn't have to be exactly this. Gnasher's Tooth is also going to be really good. You're going to have really high uptime on that extra auto attack. Syndra does have kind of a long attack animation, so Gnasher's Tooth is not as good as it was in the previous sets. KDA Ari, who's probably like the most similar unit to Syndra. She does a lot of frontline. Anti-heal is always good, but it's not as important because Syndra is going to kill her target. She's a really high burst champion. This is kind of like the board with the core legendaries, Lysandra and Set, but obviously you're not going to have this board right off the bat, so I'll talk about some of those real briefly. Positioning, Set 11 so far has a lot of target largest clump that's being kind of played in a lot of these PvE games. We'll see if these champions become meta. For example, Nautilus stunning your Syndra would be really bad. You don't want that to happen. I don't know if Nautilus is going to be meta, but that's why these kind of bait units are kind of placed over here on the side with your primary carry over here. Make sure your Shred, Ionic Spark in this case, is same size Syndra. It's 2 hex range. So I'll talk about some of the board examples. Stage 2, Teemo is a really low cost champion. He's 30 mana as well. So if you're starting off the game with like blue buff on 2-5, Teemo can be a really good item holder. Trick Shot with Sivir and then Story Weavers for frontline could be a pretty good level 4. And then on level 5, you can add in any Bruiser or any Warden. That's a really good mix of frontline backline. And Teemo's going to be the best item holder you can find at 1 or 2 cost. So this is another item holder you could potentially use, and you don't have to transition from the stage 2 into the stage 3 boards. These are just very rough examples. You're not going to hit this board every single game, obviously, because you're not going to be rolling on stage 2 or 3 very often. Probably, if you're unsure, probably just never is a good rule of thumb. But Zoe could potentially be your AP carry. You can kind of transition it from this board into this board. You can see you're still using Riven, Garen. You're just replacing Sivir Teemo with Zoe and then some Arcanists. So we're going 4 Arcanists instead of the Trick Shot Teemo carry. And yeah, Alawi pairs with Garen as Warden and then a bunch of Arcanists. Soraka will give you 2 synergies, so that's why I mentioned that. She'll give you Heavenly and Altruist, which is a team-wide resistance buff. So on stage 4, without legendaries, this is kind of the level 8 board that you should be able to get pretty consistently. The only hard champion to get here is Syndra. You should be able to hit the rest of the board most of the time if you're rolling on level 8. Obviously, you do need to hit the Syndra. It is a Syndra comp, so hard to play it without Syndra. But if you don't hit her, maybe you could try to carry just 2-star Zoe temporarily. You could also go for Morgana or Lilia if you happen to hit those. And then, of course, you would play their supporting units. Morgana being Sage and Lillian being Invoker. But if you do hit the board, this could be 6 Arcadists. Ahri and Syndra both share Fated, so that gives you 2 out of 3. So playing Thresh for your 3rd Fated unit just makes a lot of sense. Alawi is Warden, and she's going to be tankier than Thresh because she's going to benefit from the 6 Arcanist. So she's going to give herself a really big shield. So playing another Warden and making Alawi your main tank instead of Thresh makes a lot of sense. So Mumu makes sense here. It also gives Porcelain to Lux, which doesn't matter too much, but every kind of like free synergy that you can get is, why not? So the core legendaries, this is a board that I showed at the very top. This is a board that I showed at the very top of the beginning of this video. So Set and Lysandra are kind of the core legendaries. The reason is Set is Fated, so that will let you replace that Thresh in your comp, which is not a terrible unit, but not super great either. Set is obviously much better, and he's Warden, so it lets you also replace that Amumu, pairing with Alawi to give Alawi Warden. Lysandra is just, she's just a 5-cost Arcanist, so you can replace Zoe with her, and she'll pair with Lux for Porcelain. And then I think Silas seems like a pretty good add-in here. He just gives Umbral with Set, but if you look at like what else you could play instead of Silas, I think Umbral is a pretty good frontline buff because with 6 Arctish, you're gonna have a lot of damage. So typically you'll need more frontline. You always want a good mix of frontline and damage. Imagine you have a comp that has like infinity damage, but everything just dies instantly. It's not gonna be able to do. You're not gonna be able to win fights. And the same thing with the other way around. You always need a good mix. So once you hit a bunch of legendaries, this is like a level 9 version of the board, you could kind of transition out. You can drop some of the weaker Arcanists. You can drop Lux, like Porcelain is kind of whatever. You could potentially drop, I dropped Nico here. Even though she does give Heavenly, it's kind of like whatever. And some of the other level 9 units that could slot in nicely. Morgana is Ghostly with Laui, is Sage with Diana and Wukong. Wukong could potentially be Heavenly with Straka, which would potentially be Ultras with Rakan. This is kind of just based on PvE so far. Like Rakan has a really impactful area of effect damage reduction, so you kind of just want to like fit a lot of these units in. Sage, kind of 3 Sage will kind of compensate for losing the AP from Arcanist. You'll get team-wide AP from Sage as well. But basically, you're just playing a lot more higher quality units here. It doesn't have to be this exact board. If you just happen to hit like a 2-star Azir, or like you might even want to item carry it instead of Syndra and kind of pivot to playing in a couple of invokers to pair with Azir. But yeah, this is a potential board you could play with Syndra carry late game. So I want to talk about some other boards that you could play into it. I think like this board without the legendaries, you can hit pretty often. The 6 Arcanist board is not super flexible, but early game you're not going to be able to play into this that often. So I just want to show like maybe another example. Kog'Maw is a really good blue buff holder early. He's 30 mana, so this could be a potential item holder early. It doesn't have to be exactly blue buff. I'll use some different items just to show you guys another possibility of some of the items. I just put some in the other team builder that were consistent, but it doesn't have to be exactly those. Nico is a way that you can transition into Arcanist from here, and then another mythic unit could be Cho'Gath, and then your 1 out 2 Heavenly, 1 out 2 Behemoth. So you could start with a board like this. Let's just say instead of blue buff we have adaptive. That's completely fine. It's not going to cap quite as high, but you know, if you're playing stages 2, 3, 4, that's like half the game with an adaptive when someone else is sitting on a tier trying to greed blue buff, you might have saved like 30 or 40 HP on them, and that's gonna net you like potentially much more extra placements than capping out with that blue buff. Nashor's is going to be really good. Kog'Maw is a really low mana item, low mana champion, so the item is really good. It's going to be really good on Syndra later on. You could play like Ashe here, for example, for sniper. This could lead into potentially like Alawi at level 6, which will give you Arcanist and Ghostly with Ashe. So this is just like an example of a board that can kind of transition into your Syndra comp that we're building towards. And again, it doesn't have to have these exact items. Maybe you can use Guard Breaker, so these could be your Syndra items. That's completely fine. You don't have to go for best in slot. The frontline items I think I used in my other examples were Steadfast and Warmogs, but again, it doesn't have to be exactly that. Maybe you have this item, maybe you have this item, like you slammed adaptive, so you don't need another tier, you can use it on Redemption. And then like how can we kind of transition this into Arcanist? So our backline is just snipers, right? 2 snipers. This is really, really easy to replace 2 snipers. Like maybe you hit Zoe, and you're just instantly like boom, two Arcanists as soon as I can find them. Lux. So like now we're playing 4 Arcanists instead of this like 2 Arcanists, 2 snipers. Very, very, very clean transition. But again, like you just have to early game. You just have to kind of play what you hit. It's not always going to be the same. It's not always going to be the same. The items as well. So I'm kind of showing you some different items you might have. Last time I had Spark, but maybe this time you have Static Shiv. Maybe you have something like Crown Guard. Again, Crown Guard is kind of hard to make because Rod is very valuable in this comp. But let's say you already have your carry items, then by all means you can go Crown Guard. When we're looking at this board here, this is level 7. This Cho'Gath is only giving us Behemoth at this point. So maybe we could just upgrade him to Thresh, right? So that kind of makes our transition into the comp easier because we're going to want to play the Ari Syndra, and we're gonna want that Thresh to complete Faded. So we could just upgrade our Malphite into a Thresh 1-to-1, and we keep the exact same synergies. Sorry, upgrade Cho'Gath into Thresh. So this is just like some ways you can kind of think about like how to steadily progress your comp. And then, I mean, this is level 7. Like, obviously, you don't really need Malphite. He is giving 2 synergies, but whatever. And then at level 8, you'll add in the Ari and the Syndra, and then we're pretty much at our comp. I didn't have this Malphite, and what did I have instead? Oh, I think I had a Mumu who'll give Warden to our primary carry, whereas Malphite was giving Behemoth to Thresh, whereas we want Warden for our primary main tank. Also matches with Lux as well. And then, of course, eventually we're going to want to find a replacement. Zoe 1 is fine. Like, you don't, as long as you, if the units aren't itemized, it's not super important. You can sell a Zoe 2, put a Zoe 1 in, eventually get back that Zoe 2, and then we've reached our board here. We have our shred here. We have our different tank items, different carry items, and it doesn't. Yeah, you don't have to go for exactly best in slot. Just mix and match. You should top 4 a lot more games this way, and even by saving HP, you'll be able to greed your econ and kind of not feel pressure to roll down to, like 10 gold in stage 4 by being low HP and then never recovering your econ throughout all of stage 4, all of stage 5. And you'll be able to cap out a lot higher that way, even if you don't have best in slot items. If you do reach that kind of like legendary version of this board that I showcased earlier, like with Rakan, with Wukong, with Seth, Lissandra, then even if you don't have best in slot items, you're going to be way stronger than someone who kind of greeted best in slot, but because they're low HP from greeting their items, they're kind of unable to get to level 9, and they just have like maybe like the stage 5 version of the board with the core legendaries with like just Set and just Lissandra. But yeah, again, this is really early in PvE. I don't really know if this comp is going to be good. It's kind of depend on the balancing, which is very, very, very tricky to do. Riot's dev team does do a good job, but we'll have to see how it shapes up. But if you have any questions, comments, anything, let me know in the discussion thread in the TFT Coaching Discord. Thanks for watching.